The Rerun Banners of version 3.0 is one of the most tempting banners of all time because it can be very difficult to choose between Augusta and Cartethyia, two of the most powerful units in the game, if you fail to get them during their debut banners, especially if you're free-to-play or low spender. Rerunning them alongside their best slot sub DPS buffers doesn't make it easy either, since polls can be limited for the majority of players out there. But don't worry if you fall into this category because I've got you covered. In this video, I'll be breaking down the pros and cons of having any of the 5-star rerun characters on your account, how dependent they are on their signature weapons, and best in slot teammates, team building versatility, and their best early sequences. Let's start with Kuro's favorite character, Cartethyia, who will be in the first phase of version 3.0. Her kit has an inbuilt anti-interruption and enemy stagnation, which is a huge game changer because you normally have to get at least S1 for most units to obtain such quality of life changes. She'll mostly fulfill the role of a main DPS in your team building due to her high damage potential, but she's more restricted to a hypercarry playstyle at S0 due to her dependency on Arrow Rover or Chisa to increase the max stacks of arrow erosion, and this makes her outro skill a bit underwhelming, especially if you don't have good investment in Ciaconna or you don't have her on your account at all. So if you're like me who does not like being restricted to one playstyle, S0 Cartethyia might not be the best unit for you to pull. But if you do manage to get S2, which is her best early sequence, it removes her dependency on Arrow Rover or Chisa, so you can replace Arrow Rover with another arrow unit that has a high damage potential like Jian and Iuno, making her team building much more diverse so that it doesn't become boring over time. As for her synergy with Ciaconna, she's not heavily reliant on her in single target endgame modes like the Tower of Adversity because of her ability to switch between Cartethyia for arrow erosion application, which increases the damage of Fleur-de-Lis. And since Sanhua allows you to perform double intros and provide basic attack damage amplification, she can be replaced with Ciaconna and you won't have any issues. But in multi-wave content like Rimbrain Waste, it can be very difficult if you don't have Ciaconna for wide area of arrow erosion application, since enemies die within a very short amount of time, taking all the arrow erosion that you've applied along with them to the afterlife. For weapons, Cartethyia doesn't have decent weapon options mainly due to her HP scaling, and her weapon provides a whopping 72% HP, so you'll be losing quite a lot of damage if you're not running her signature weapon. This can make her quite expensive to build, so my best recommendation is to get her weapon first and then get Ciaconna later if you're low on pulls, since Sanhua is free. Ciaconna. Since we've clearly established that you don't really need her in Cartethyia teams to beat endgame content, the focus will be on how much value she can provide for your account from a versatility point of view, so that you don't get the wrong impression that without Cartethyia, Ciaconna is pretty useless on your account. At S0, she can provide 39% arrow damage bonus to all teammates from her passive and her echo set, making her a viable pick when building teams around arrow damage dealers. My favorite team so far outside of Cartethyia teams is Ciaconna, Iuno, and Jian. This team composition saves me Showkeeper, Verena, and Mortefi for other team compositions, which can be very useful since 2 more floors have been added to the middle tower. The best part is that her damage output is quite decent as a hybrid unit, and she has one of the fastest field times in the game if you manage to use the jump cancel technique. For those who are not familiar with this tech, just jump, press basic attack 2 times to perform mid-air attacks, and then the moment she lifts off the ground, press jump again to cancel the clone drop animation. If you plan to use her outside of Cartethyia teams, mastering this tech is highly recommended to offset not being able to provide much powerful buffs like arrow damage amplification so that you can get very decent clear times. This also means that you should have a well-optimized build so that you can do decent damage alongside the arrow units that you wish to pair her with. I actually feel like a hypocrite since my build is not that cracked, but I'm still working on it. For her weapon, feel free to skip it if you can barely afford it. Static Mist will do just fine, and it allows her to buff the incoming Resonator's attack by 10%. For those who would like to get sequences, S2 is her best early sequence, and at that point, she becomes the best and most versatile arrow damage buffer in the game. Augusta. She is one of my favorite characters to play with because her Ultra skill, which provides 15% all-type damage amplification, allows you to play her in double DPS team compositions, like Showkeeper, Augusta, and Shang Liao team for example. but it comes with a little bit of difficulty because spending more than 14 seconds on the DPS like Liao that receives Augusta's 15% damage amplification buff will not only make them lose the buff, but prevents Augusta from obtaining one Majesty stack at S0, which is needed for her to stop time and do more damage. So if you're not comfortable with that, just stick with the traditional hypercarry playstyle with Mortefi or Iuno as her sub DPS buffer. But it gets boring over time, so I highly recommend that you experiment with double DPS if you decide to pull for Augusta. It's also worth mentioning that those that enjoy quick swapping will not be happy with Augusta, because the Resonator that receives the buff from her Ultra skill cannot swap out by any means because it'll prevent Augusta from obtaining one Majesty stack. From a gameplay perspective, Augusta also spends too much time on the field before she can use her Forte Circuit or the Griffin Plunge, which gives her the last Majesty stack that she needs to use her Liberation, which stops time to do more damage. This can easily make her lose the heavy attack damage buffs from sub DPS buffers like Mortefi and Iuno if highly aggressive enemies make you dodge multiple times or you get interrupted, making you lose quite a lot of damage as well. The last thing you need to keep in mind from a gameplay perspective is that the shields that she gives herself have the strength of a tissue paper, so don't rely on it to protect you from damage. For team building, she's very free-to-play friendly because of Mortefi, so you don't have to pull for Iuno if the DPS units that you have on your account are not in a competition for Mortefi like Galbarena and Jian. Speaking of Jian, his signature weapon works incredibly well and is only about 5 to 6% worse than her signature weapon when both of them are at R1 and you run a crit damage forecast while using Augusta's signature weapon. But the damage difference is almost the same when running crit rate on both weapons, and it's actually recommended for you to run crit rate when using her weapon anyway to avoid restarting your runs multiple times. So if you have Jian's signature weapon, don't bother getting Augusta's signature weapon. For early sequences, I highly recommend S1 because of the anti-interruption so that you can turn your brain off when using the Griffin Plunge attack from her Forte Circuit. Iuno. There's a very big misconception that she's just a buffer made for Augusta, but this has been disproven so many times by me and other creators through showcases, so I don't want you guys to think of Iuno as just some buffer or a support. She's made to fulfill multiple roles in your team building, including sustain through healing, decent damage output, 40% damage amplification from one life stacks, which she can give to herself and Augusta, and finally, 50% heavy attack damage amplification that she can give to any heavy attack damage focused DPS. And this is where some of you guys might say that her damage is not as high as dedicated main damage dealers with the damage dealer role like Augusta. So she's more likely to get power creeped, especially through HP inflation in endgame content. But considering how Danjin can still solo endgame content proves that Kuro handles power creeping really well. And for those that still insist that her value is tied to Augusta as a buffer, but not necessarily because of her damage output, do keep in mind that in terms of actual buffing capabilities, Iuno is only 1.3% better than S6 Mortefi, which is absolutely wild. But you can see right here that I was able to clear Dragon of Dirge within 33 seconds. But in the Mortefi team, I had to spend 54 seconds to beat Dragon of Dirge. So this is a clear example that Iuno's main value in your team building is not just because of her buffing capabilities, but rather how she increases the team's overall damage output by adding her own personal damage. So don't hesitate to pull if you're more interested in playing Iuno as a main DPS character. But that means that you have to get her signature weapon or at least Zhang Liao's signature, or else you'll be wasting that high damage potential. Be sure to check out my guide video on how you can extend her field time to do even more damage. For early sequences, Iuno doesn't really need them because they don't fix anything wrong with their kit design at S0, but S2 is what I would aim for, not only to buff Augusta, but Iuno as well. That'll be all for my complete pull value breakdown of version 3.0 Rerun Banners. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel because it's free and you can always change your mind. Our Discord link will be in the pinned comment if you're having any issues with the game, help with your build, or you just want a place to chill or hang out. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.